A clapped-out private eye reduced to finding lost cats is about to be dragged into something much more tantalising in 40 minutes when Art Carney and Lily Tomlin star in the comedy thriller The Late Show. Highlights of the Edinburgh Festival coming up on BBC Two shortly, including the world premiere of the latest work by Ariel Dorfman, author of Death and the Maiden. Here on BBC One, Tales of an Englishman in Hollywood, with Parkinson.
George. Hello, G. George. Are you all right? Are you going to try to land? Do you want to fix?
The name's not G. George, it's P. Peter. Peter D. Carter. D's for David. Squadron leader Peter Carter. No, I'm not going to land. Undercarriage is gone. Inner port's on fire. I'm bailing out presently. I'm bailing out. Take a telegram.
Got your message. Received your message. We can hear you.
Telegram to my mother. Mrs. Michael Carter, 88 Hampstead Lane, London, Northwest.
88 Hampstead Lane, London.
Tell her that I love her. You'll have to write this for me, but what I want her to know is that I love her very much. That I've never shown it to her, not really, but that I've loved her always, right up to the end.
Received your message. We can hear you. Are you wounded? Repeat, are you wounded? Are you bailing out?
What's your name?
June.
Yes, June, I'm bailing out. I'm bailing out, but there's a catch. I've got no parachute.
That was David Niven doing what he did better than most, playing the officer and gentleman. He was a film star for 40 years, when movies, particularly those made in Hollywood, were the most popular entertainment in the world. He was an accomplished light comedian with a debonair style and beautiful manners. It was a role he played in real life too, and with great success. Naturally charming, he made you feel awkward by comparison, and he was always so impeccably turned out, it made you wish you'd cleaned your shoes. Educated at public school and at Sandhurst, he became a lumberjack, barman, waiter, even sold bootleg booze during Prohibition before starting his film career as a Hollywood extra. Firstly, a brief clip from an interview in 1972 when I asked him about his childhood and his first love.
Do we get bleeped on this program?
No, we don't get bleeped. You may speak freely.
Well, I know what you're getting at, Mike. Well, if you can take the bleeps. Anyway, I was sort of almost 15. It's my excuse, anyway. And we lived in London, and there wasn't room for me in this small house. So I was farmed out into a room up at St. James's Place, and we lived in Sloane Street. And so every night after dinner, this creepy stepfather I had used to give me tuppence for the bus, number 19 and number or 22 or 30, I remember those up Sloane Street. And I used to get off at the Ritz Hotel and walk down into my ghastly burrow with a pot under the bed and all that. So, and I got more adventurous, and I used to walk further on up to Piccadilly and look at all the lights, the Bovril and Albridge's Lung Tonic and all those lovely things. And then I realized that lots of girls were walking about, at the same time. So, I once saw a spectacular pair of legs, and I followed this girl just to look at her. And she seemed to have an awful lot of men friends, and she'd talk to people. And so I went to my room, and I kept on thinking about this girl. I read it. The next night, I couldn't wait to get up to Piccadilly again, and I walked around, and I couldn't find her. And finally I did, and I saw her with a very nice-looking man. I thought it was her father, man in a dinner jacket, and she took him into this little house in Cork Street. And I hid and waited to see if she ever came out again. She did, came out quite soon, as a matter of fact. So anyway, after that, I really thought of this girl all the time. And I used to go looking for her at night. And one night, she suddenly turned on me. She was a lovely cockney. She said, what do you want? Do you want a piece, mate? What are you doing, What was she talking about? I said, do you want to come home with me? And I said, yes. So I thought, I'm taking this dream, took me into this flat. And I thought this is going to be the ginger beer and the gramophone record. And,
a likely story.
Yeah, and then she said, she gave me this ghastly book of photographs and said, look, if you're having any trouble, take a look at these first. And so and then she appeared with, the usual thing, the sort of pink shoes and nothing else, and I'm gibbering. I was just gibbering. So she said, well, right, you can wash over there dear. And there was a little terrible sort of kidney-shaped table full of blue fluid, you know. So I washed my hands. I didn't know. No, please.
I think that's a marvelous introduction to fair sex. I tell you what, it beats sex education films, isn't it?
Well, yes.
It does. Yeah, and then I know reading your book too that you became so very fond of it, didn't you? And she was.
It's true. I really did. It sounds corny and odd, but I think I fell in love with her very much.
Mm.
And she used to come down and see me at school.
Mm.
And she'd never seen the country before. She came from Hoxton, never seen the country. She used to arrive with this ghastly tartan rug and potted shrimp sandwiches. Oh dear. Well, thank God for the rug anyway.
Did she ever meet any of them? I mean, it must have been a bit dangerous going to school. I mean, you were at boarding school at the time.
I was at Stowe. And it had this marvellous headmaster called Roxburgh.
Mm.
And the cricket match was on, and she was really a dish, a real beauty. Lovely girl. And Roxburgh came over, saw me sitting on the rug with this girl watching the cricket. And, it was agony. And he said, may I join you? And I said, oh, sir, please, and this is, Miss, I won't give the name even now. So she said, you don't look a bit like a schoolmaster, do you, dear, Anyway, and he knew.
Yeah.
What was remarkable about David Niven was the difference between the confident man who appeared on camera and the gibbering wreck waiting to go on. I never met anyone so nervous about appearing on television. Half an hour before the interview you've just seen, I heard him being ill in the dressing room next door to mine. When I went to see if I could help, he said he was always sick with fear before a public appearance. Well, we met again in 1975, by which time David Niven had become a literary celebrity as well as a film star.
Evening and welcome. Now, if you're a writer, just suppose you're a writer and you had a first novel published this week, you could expect to sell 250 copies in hardback. If you're an established writer with a bit of form, you might sell between 600 and 700 hardback copies. Well, my special guest tonight wrote a book once. It was his first effort. It sold 200,000 copies in hardback and a staggering 4 million in both hard and paperback. It's not bad for a beginner, and certainly not bad for a book described by the author as the sort people like to read in the loo. That book must have been a lot of loo time reading. That book was called The Moon is a Balloon, and the companion volume called Bring on the Empty Horses is just published. The author, my special guest tonight, David Niven. I mentioned the fact that you've written a sequel to Moon is a Balloon, but you've been on record as saying that before, that you wouldn't in fact write a sequel to that book. What made you change your mind?
Well, the New York publisher, Putnam, after I got lucky with the first one, called me up, and I went to see him, and he offered me a large sum to write something else. And I said, what? And he said, anything you like. So I said, fine, and I grabbed the check and quickly spent it. And about a year later, he said, how's the book coming along? And he went on like that, sort of cat and mouse game for quite a while. And then I really had to sit down. And so I started to write a novel. I really did, and it was not very good. And then I dipped into the bottomless pit of Hollywood and thought I'd better write about something I know, because I'm not good at making it up. Mm. And I wrote about ancient Hollywood, really. Mm. And it's about Hollywood between 1935 and 1960, which happened to coincide with what is laughingly referred to as the Great Days. Or maybe they were, maybe they weren't, but I try to describe them anyway.
Mm. It is, in fact, a fond obituary. That's basically what the book is, for a lost society.
Well, it's an obituary for that period, yes, but Mike, Hollywood today is booming again. And today it is, I just came back from making a movie there, and Hollywood is now in the book, I don't try to make any comparison between the two. I settled solely for that period, and I was there from extra on down. And at that point, it was controlled by about 6 moguls. And it was full of immense personalities and enormous superstars and great writers. And now it is full of great talent, marvelous talent, wonderful new faces. And it's controlled this time by conglomerates and computers and a handful of powerful agents and bankers and lawyers. It's the same game, but differently composed.
Yes, and far less glamorous, actually. But we'll talk about some of the writers and the stars that you talk about, you bring back to life again in your book later on. First of all, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about being a writer, because you had this remarkable change in your life where at a late stage in your career you became a very successful writer indeed. I do envy you, actually. 4 million copies. God, that's true. Anyway, envy. But do you find inspiration comes easily to you as a writer?
No, not at all. I mean, first of all, I got absolutely no powers of concentration whatever. And if it's a nice day, I can't write because it's something else to do. And if it's raining, it's too dreary to write. And I'll make any excuse. I mean, if an aeroplane goes over, it's a bonanza. I'll watch that for hours. And my wife, I can't wait. I beg her to come along with some awful news that the boiler's burst or something, you know. And finally, I've got one little chair in the garden, right up against a corner of a hedge like this. I can't even see the sky, and I sit there and do my best.
Yes. Do you regard yourself now as an actor or as an author?
Oh, as an actor. I mean, I regard this as a terrific, not a sideline even. I mean, I'm an amateur at it. I love doing it. If it's a success, I mean, I was so happy with the unexpected success of the other one because I really wrote it for a few chums for Christmas, you know.
You were an awful lot of chums. Bring on the Empty Horses. It's an intriguing title for a book about Hollywood. How does it arise? Where does it come from?
Well, I have to put a little self-bleep machine into this.
You don't have to.
I do, I think.
You do, all
yes.
right.
There was a great Hungarian director called Mike Curtiz, and he was directing The Charge of the Light Brigade. And his English was very peculiar. And Errol Flynn and I were standing underneath the rostrum, and he was on it. And the charge had taken place, a lot of it. And as you know, everybody was killed. And it was time for about 200 riderless chargers to arrive. So Mike, with his megaphone, says, "Bring on the empty horses." And so Flynn and I fell down, you know. And he turned on us through the microphone, the megaphone it was in those days. "You bums, you lousy, limey bastards, you jerks," you know. He said, "You and your goddamn language, you think I know bleep nothing, and I know bleep all."
You've been in Hollywood for, what, 40 years, haven't you?
Well, I've been in the business 40 years. I lived there for all those 25 years, and I go back often.
And what was it like being a young, struggling actor in those days in Hollywood? As you said, they were the great days. There was a big industry there. But of course, you didn't walk in straight away and become a superstar, did you?
No, I was an extra, and that was hell. That was really hell.
What kind of extra were you? I mean, you were typified, classified?
Yeah, I was classified because there were the dress extras who were very snooty. And they had clothes for every occasion. You know, they had ball gowns and race-going clothes and office clothes and bankers' clothes and all that. And they got paid $10 a day, which is about £3, I suppose. And then there were the people who looked all right in uniforms and that sort of thing, could walk properly. And the rest of us were the cattle. I was one of the cattle. And we were put in sort of ethnic groups. There were, you know, Asian and American red and American white and American black. And I was Anglo-Saxon type 2008. Do you
remember the first lines you ever spoke in a movie when you moved from being an extra?
Yes, I remember the first 3 lines I spoke.
First 3 lines?
One was, I said, "Hello, my dear." No, "Goodbye, my dear," to Alyssa Landy at a railway station. And I was such a smash in that I was hired to say "Hello, my dear" to Ruth Chatterton at another station. And then my big moment was in a Sam Goldwyn production with Miriam Hopkins and Joel McRae and Edward G. Robinson. And I was a Cockney sailor. and I was thrown out of the window of a brothel in San Francisco into 3 foot of mud. And I said, all right, I'll go. and Miriam and Joel and Eddie Robinson and some donkeys and 40 vigilantes walked over the top of them.
Auspicious debut.
Yes.
Yeah. What about one of the fascinating things that comes out in what you've written is the amount of importance that was attached in those days in Hollywood to publicity, to the value of publicity, so making yourself known. I mean, what kind of tricks did they get up to, some publicity experts?
Well, Mike, you see, in those days, it was not great talents. It was great personalities. And there were probably 40 people who could support a picture. Today, there are probably 4 who could support any picture.
Yes.
And it was a case of publicity, building up grains of sand until they became sizable hills that could be seen a long way off, really. And they got up to all sorts of tricks. And the first publicity came from the circus, came from Barnum and Bailey's circus, a man called Harry Reichenbach. And he was hired in the early days to publicize one of the first Tarzan pictures. And he booked a room in a hotel on the ground floor in a hotel right opposite where the theater was in New York, where it was going to open. And a large packing case was delivered to his room. And then he pressed the bell and ordered 8 pounds of chopped hamburger for lunch. So the waiter tottered up with this great platter. And there was a large lion sitting at his table with a napkin around his neck. So the waiter sued Harry Reichenbach under men's publicity. That was really the first publicity stunt.
Really?
And it sort of backfired. He got badly sued. The next one that backfired was Mae West. Mae West backfired? That sounds very strange. The next one that backfired was Mae West. She was doing a movie called It Ain't No Sin. And they had a brilliant idea, and they got together 140 parrots and put them into intensive training. And these poor animals were taught to say, it ain't no sin. And they were going to be put on perches in hotel lobbies and things all around the city for the opening of the picture. And at the last minute, the Hayes office, which was the group in charge of the morals of Hollywood, decided that It Ain't No Sin was a dirty title and changed it to I'm No Angel. So the poor bloody parrots were taken away and given a crash course in this. And then they were put on the perches, and frightful noises and whistles came out, and they were sent home in disgrace. My favorite one, though, of all that flops was Walt Disney, of all people, and he did Pinocchio. And for the opening of Pinocchio in New York, he hired 12 midgets, and he dressed them up as Pinocchio and put them up on the marquee of the theater to gamble about, and cause a stir for the traffic and everything. And everything went along beautifully until lunchtime, when somebody sent them up a couple of bottles of bourbon. And the midgets then started playing strip poker up there, and by 3 o'clock they were all naked and belching and screaming about on the top, and the fire department brought them down in pillowcases.
A drunken midget in a pillowcase. I don't believe a word of it. The other people, of course, who were around about that time, it's absurd, isn't it? were the gossip columnists. I mean, as you say, Hollywood invented the publicity stunt. They also invented the gossip columnist, didn't they? And you suffered, or certainly lived through, the two most powerful were women, weren't they? Hedda Hopper.
They were immensely powerful. Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons. And one was short and fat, and the other was long and thin. And they were both mines of misinformation.
Yes.
But they were very, very powerful, because between them they covered every single newspaper in the United States. They had millions of readers. And they had daily big profiles, they did. They were very powerful. I don't think they could ever destroy anybody who had great talent. They both hacked away at Marlon. Never destroyed him. They had terrific favorites, and they had terrific enemies. Hedda's great enemy was Orson Welles, because he made Citizen Kane, and Hearst, of course, was the prototype of that, and Hearst was her boss. And Hedda took against Chaplin. She loathed Chaplin because she was very politically minded. But it was much easier with those other things to, well, she thought he was very left-wing and commie and all that stuff. And in fact, as she was dying, aged 82, had written her last column the morning before, I think. She said, I hear that son of a bitch Chaplin is trying to get back in the country, you got to stop that, and then died, you know. So they were very rough, and the studios used them, and I remember I was under contract with Sam Goldwyn for 15 years, and something happened. I had a contract that was coming up for renewal or dissipation or something, and Goldwyn decided to soften me up for the kill and to get me to settle for less money. And I was rather popular, I thought, at the studio. I'd been there as a beginner, you know, and I picked up the paper. Headline, Niven Unbearable, say fellow workers. And a big thing saying I'd got so swollen-headed that nobody could work with me and I hated me on Goldwyn, and Llewellyn put it in to help Goldwyn. I mean, that sort of thing did happen.
Yeah, it must have made life very uncomfortable. I suppose that you had to be pleasant to these people, didn't
Well,
you?
you know, you did. You see, we were all whores, really, because it was much easier to go with them than against them, honestly.
Yes.
And they could make it very uncomfortable for you.
Did you ever manage to get back at any of them?
Well, we did a little thing once. Ida Lupino, there was a great friend of mine, and she was married to a very rough man called Howard Duff. She still is. And my wife, Yordis, my wife, and we loathed Hedda and Llewellyn at this point. We both had problems with them. All four of us had problems. So we had a little plan. We had dinner together. And then I called up Ciaro's, which was the sort of chic nightclub, and booked a table for two. And the head waiter said, oh, yes, Mr. Niven, just you and madam. And I said, just give me a quiet corner table in the dark. And then Ida and I arrived. And terrific twittering, because there were spies everywhere for the colonists, you know, in all the brothels and in all the hospitals and everywhere there were spies. And immediately, I mean, next thing I knew, about 3 or 4, 15 cameramen arrived, and here Loopy and I are sitting in one corner, she's nibbling my ear and the whole bit. And right in the middle of all this excitement, in comes Howard and Yordis, and go to the other side of the dance floor. And Lupino says, she overdid it, she said, you must flee, you must flee. I mean, and Howard, who was reputed as a brawler, you know, now he spotted us and kicked over his table, crashed. Now everybody in the place is watching. Everybody's waiting. And I pretended to be a bit gassed, you know, and I got up from mine, and we took our coats off. Big deal. Now all the photographers getting into position for the kill. And the dance floor's cleared, and we go on the dance floor, and we circle round, you know, looking at each other. The classic Western ending, you know. And then finally, we grabbed each other, kissed each other on the mouth, and waltzed all around the room.
Can we talk about some of the great figures that you worked with? Take your pick. Cooper. I mean, Gary Cooper. You worked with him, didn't you? Did you ever feel in awe of any of these people when you were younger coming out?
Yes, because they were superstars. I mean, the word superstar is used a lot now. These people really were. I mean, Cooper and Gable and Bogey and those characters, they used to get, I mean it, I saw them, 20,000 letters a week each from people. And they were gods, they really were, because there was no competition. There was no television, no bingo halls, no night baseball, nothing else. People used to go to the movies. In fact, in those days, 200 million people each week paid to see Hollywood movies. Mm. And I, of course, one was in awe. And the first sort of big movie I was put into was a picture with Lubitsch, who was the master director, directing Cooper and Claudette Colbert. And I was terrified. And Lubitsch was a wonderful little man, and he got me into his office and acted out my part for me brilliantly. And I collapsed, and he said, what's the matter? And I said, well, I can't possibly do that. I can't ever do it. He said, are you frightened of me? And I said, no, I am. Yes, I'm terrified of you. So he said, well, let me tell you something. Cooper is terrified of Claudette because this is the first comedy he's ever done. And Claudette is terrified of Coop because he's such a natural actor. And I'd give you some more news. I'm terrified of both of them. So he said, what you will do, you will be on the set every day for a week before you start work, so you get to know everybody, and you'll be a member of the family. And they took all that trouble in those days.
Yes.
But one was terribly nervous.
But was he a natural actor? Cooper,
Oh,
was it? What he
was so natural that it was frightening. He was the most relaxed man I've ever known. I mean, after a take, he'd just go to sleep on the floor or something. Oh, I did love him. I wish I could have learned his calm. I said to him one day, because he had this tremendous concentration. That's why all eyes went to him on the screen. Brando had the same.
Yes.
You always look at Brando because he's concentrating so much. And I thought this was the same with Cooper. And I said to him, Mr. Cooper, I call him now. I said, Mr. Cooper, you know, you've got this terrific concentration. How do you do it? He said, concentration? He said, Jesus, I'm trying to remember what the hell I have to say next.
You also knew Garbo very well, too, of course. How intimidating was she? Could she be?
Well, she was terribly intimidating. For instance, Groucho Marx, she straightened him out. She was walking around the lot. I used to see her in the distance with these big floppy hats on and sort of sport running outfit on. And she was approaching the big floppy hat, and Groucho, with that terrible crouch and cigar, came on and looked up underneath the hat, you know, like this. And he found himself staring, these two eyes of Baltic blue staring at him. And he panicked, and he said, oh, pardon me, ma'am, I thought you were a guy I knew in Pittsburgh. But, you know, she was marvelous because years later, I bought her old house. And we lived in it happily for 15 years. And one day, a mutual friend appeared at our house, and behind him was Garbo. And I nearly fell through the floor. And she said, I hope you don't mind me coming, but the happiest days of my life were spent in this house. I would love to see it again. And my wife is Swedish, so they became firm chums. And she was always in the place, and absolutely marvelous. And we went on a yachting trip once. Yordis, my wife, and I, and Garbo, and a man friend of hers who was supposed to navigate the boat. I was sailing it, and we headed for Catalina Island, which is about 40 miles off into the Pacific. And if you miss that, you go to Japan, you know. So we said, and something went wrong with the navigation. The man got at the schnapps, is really what happened. And we couldn't, and he said, don't worry. He said, everything's all right. The sun was going down. And he said, look, the sun will sink, and we'll see the outline of the island. We're all right. So the sun sizzled into the sea, and there was no sign of the island at all. So we were lost. So he disappeared below, and he made all sorts of calculations, and emerged. He said, I've got it. We're 9 miles north of the Grand Canyon. So it was kind of a strange, fraught weekend, and the lavatory broke, and in a small boat like that, you get to know people. You would. You should get to know people. And she was marvelous. She was spectacular and volunteered for all the dirty jobs and everything. But at the end of it, I didn't know her any better. And it was 6 days. Except I knew one thing, that she did not have large feet.
No, that was always the thing about it.
Yeah, always the thing. And actually, she had very beautifully shaped feet, but she's tall. But she had an awful habit of encasing them in great big brown loafers. It looked like landing craft. And Bob Taylor was doing Camille with her. And he said it was awful. He knew that she was wearing these marvelous crinolines and these magnificent hairdos. But underneath, he said, I know she's got those crummy old bedroom slippers on.
Did she ever tell you, though, because one of the great mysteries is why she gave up acting, did she ever volunteer that information?
She did. I asked her. Finally, I had the guts to ask her. She came to live in France, very near us, and we used to see a great deal of her. And one day, she came over for lunch. And we were going to have lunch in the garden, and it rained. So instead of having lunch at the table, we had lunch underneath it, which was easy. And it was very cozy, and it was cozy. And so I asked her, I finally said, you know, why did you give up the movies? Because there was no reason to. And she thought for so long, I thought I'd dropped some horrendous brick. And she said I'd made enough faces. Well, it didn't help me. I didn't get any further forward, really. I think, really, what happened was she got right to the top and knew there was nowhere else to go except down. I think that's what happened.
How difficult was it, though, to remain unimpressed by it all, by once having made it? I mean, was there any advice ever offered to you that you hung on to, which kept you sane and a survivor in Hollywood?
Well, Gable was a great chum of mine, and he was a real feet on the ground man, you know. We used to go fishing together a lot. And, he always said, you know, if you ever get to the top, be tough with the brass, with the moguls. And don't forget, he always said that it's a terrifying scenario we're taking part in, and we're going to get it in the end. Everybody expects that. And he used to say, I personally take Tracy's advice, Spencer Tracy's advice, which is to get there on time, know the jokes, take the check, and go home.
Yes. That's the way.
But I think, honestly, Michael, you're being complimentary. I think I was getting completely out of control because it's very difficult not to believe your own publicity. It was in those days because there was so much of it. Pages and pages. I think I really was saved by the war because I came back here and I was, for 6.5 years, was brought down to earth smartly. And
But did it put all this an impossible strain on your married life, for instance?
in our marriage, it lasted for 20-something years, thank God, it certainly put an awful strain because Yordis is very, very beautiful. And she was the top model in Sweden and so on. Now, a very beautiful woman should immediately, I mean, this is a tiny part of just a tiny example, should immediately attract the attention if a couple walks into a room or a restaurant.
Yeah.
But if she walks into it with a dreary old bulldog face that's been around for 500 years, she gets it second, you know, or used to anyway. And also table hopping, when people are plucking at you in Hollywood, what about you? And is left there standing. And it got to such a point she left.
Really?
She left. She said, I've got to find out if I'm anything anymore. This was after years of marriage too. And she left. She took off for 4 months.
Mm.
And I realized the horrendous thing that because of all that nonsense, I was taking the most important thing for granted, really.
Yeah.
But thank God we got the show on the road again and everything was all right.
Well, tell me another thing, David. You see, the other thing that must strike you, and I wonder if it worried you, is a lot of the people that you're friendly with, and a lot who you mention in both your books are now dead, aren't they? I mean, Flynn. It's true. Yes, it's true. I mean, you know, Gable, Flynn, Bogey, all those great stars.
I feel I'm being measured for something. I don't know what it is. I once said that to Noel Coward. I said, Noel, I've got to the point now in my life when all my chums are dying like flies. And Noel said, personally, I'm delighted that mine lasts through luncheon. No, but I know exactly what you mean. Of course, it's horrible to lose one's friends in any walk of life. But the trick is not to live in a cocoon of one group of friends and then all get born together and work together and die together. I'm lucky enough to have lots of much younger friends who I hope will see me through.
What plans, in fact, do you have for the future? For the future. Not for seeing it through, for the future. Working, I meant.
Oh, thank God.
I wasn't making a proposition either.
I thought the Mormons were coming for me. Well, now, let me think. I go to New York in about 2 or 3 days. And then I go on to Hollywood to make another movie. I made one last year. I make usually one a year to keep the sheriff away. And I made one in Malaysia last year, The Paper Tiger, with the most sensational little Japanese boy, 9, who learned to speak English for a very long part in 8 weeks. And we worked in Malaysia, where it was very strange because, they're having a little problem out there. And it's a picture basically about political kidnapping, the basis of it. And the chief of police of Kuala Lumpur said, I think this is a dangerous move for you to make out here. So I'm going to put a 24-hour-day guard on 1 or 2 of the actors, And so I was living in Kuala Lumpur Hilton. And anyway, so that we didn't do that. And the day we arrived, they killed the chief of police. It made me very nervous indeed, I can tell you. But it's a lovely part of the world and terribly hot. And it was 137 degrees. We're only 100 miles north of the equator in August. And 97% humidity. And we had 14 different nationalities in the crew and actors. Germans, Japanese, Americans, English, everything. Japanese, Chinese, Spanish cameraman, Malays, Indians. Oh, unbelievable. And 2 or 3 lovely limeys. And one fellow came from Battersea. I can't say his name. And he'd never been out of England before. He'd never been to the Isle of Wight before. He'd never been to Clacton. And he appeared in this terrific heat on the first day with a sweater on and a cap. And he looked round and he said to me, he said, turned mild, hasn't it, David? Don't think that the fly's gone into your water.
You're right.
Okay. They put it on the floor, now stand.
It's a kamikaze.
So anyway, and this fellow, one day he said to me, and the heat finally got to this fellow in his sweater and everything. He said, oh, I think I'll take a little ziz in the jungle, David. So he said, I found a nice little hole behind that tree, so keep an eye on things. If they need me, you... So he disappeared, and he came out of his hole about 2 hours later. He'd aged 50 years. And I said, what's happened to you? He said, oh, my God. He said, oh, there's been a dreadful incident, David. So I said, what is he? He said, well, he said, I woke up with a dreadful weight on my chest. And I said, what? He said, well, I looked down. It was an anaconda, David, going right across me. Well, an anaconda, that's the snake that eats the pythons, you know. About 35 feet long and bright yellow. And he said, it took about 25 minutes to go past.
Oh, the joys of filming.
Well, anyway, then after you asked me what I was going to do next.
Yes, what are you going to do next?
Then I go to New York. Then I go on to California again. I just came back from making a Walt Disney movie with a skunk that goes every time it looks at me. And a bulldog that had emphysema. It was great fun.
Well, we've reached the end, sadly. It goes so quickly with you, and normally in a situation like this, I'm faced with somebody who can sort of sing a song, they sing a song. But you, last time you were on the programme, you told a joke at the end of the programme, if you call it. It was a rather risque joke. It went down very well, actually, about an orangutan.
Yes.
Yes. And in fact, it was so popular, we repeated it. So, as a sort of party piece at the end, do you know any similar jokes you could tell me?
Sure.
Sure.
I could give you a joke about a prawn or a joke about gambling.
Let's have the prawn joke. Then if that doesn't work, we'll have the gambling.
The prawn fell in love with a crab. And it was mad about this crab. And it went home to its family, and it said, look, I'm mad about that crab that lives up around that big rock at the end. And the prawn's father was furious. He said, you're not going to be the team of the crab. Ridiculous animals, they go sideways. No way. You go to the crab and say it's all... No way, you're going to go. Tell the crab it's finished. So the prawn went back to the crab and said, crab, I'm terribly sorry. It's off. Because my father says that you look pretty bloody stupid because you go sideways. No, no matter of fact, you do. And I said, crab was furious. He said, that does it. I'll be down this evening. I'll have a seaweed and soda with your father. And went off like this. Now, at 6 o'clock in the evening, the prawns were all sitting around their rock. And the weed opened, and in came the crab. And to everybody's amazement, it came straight, like this, straight, like that. And the prawn rushed up and said, crab, crab, you're wonderful, crab, you're going straight. And the crab said, shut up, I'm pissed.
I spoke to David Niven for the last time in 1981 when he was suffering from the first symptoms of motor neurone disease, the crippling illness which led to his sad death in 1983. He was all those things we tend to make fun of nowadays. He was courteous, charming, polite, well-spoken. In more innocent times, he came to represent everything that was upright and decent about the true Brit. But I don't care how cynical you are, you have to admit it was a very attractive package. Next week, I shall be recording several encounters with Kenneth Williams. That's on Sunday at 10:55. So I hope you'll join us then. Till then, good night.
Well, in fact, you can see the Michael Parkinson interviews with Kenneth Williams next Tuesday night at 10:45 here on BBC One.